Thank you. Matthew?
Sure, thanks a lot. Matthew Lee, Inner City Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access. Thanks for this briefing. I have one question about the prize and then one about climate change. On the prize, I wanted to know, I see in the press release you talk about illegal logging and countries such as Democratic Republic of Congo, where the UN has a peacekeeping mission. And I wondered how much of this prize, how many of these groups are actually having to combat their own governments? Like I know in DRC, the allegation by Greenpeace and others is that the government is lax on this illegal logging. And so does UNDP work with governments to try to work in the same way as your prize winners are and crack down on some of these practices? And to Ms. Figueres, I saw you quoted that the current INDCs would lead to three degrees. And Mr. Pasztor from this podium has said it might be 3.5. How do you see between now and December, what would it take? Should existing commitments by countries be revised to make them more aggressive? Or do you wait, are you hoping that the ones that come in are going to somehow bring this number down closer to 2 or 1.5? Thanks a lot.
I think in answer to the first question, a lot of local communities are trying to preserve their environment in the face of either the absence of government or totally inadequate government and or corrupt government. So it's not easy. So yes, we're working at all levels. So obviously support the community level, but also the long-term work on trying to improve governance, accountability, transparency, anti-corruption is extremely important. With the UN RED initiative, which brings together UNDP, UNEP, and the FAO, and working with some of the big RED plus funders like Norway, we've also been working with governments to try and strengthen their institutions and accountability so that they can receive from international funding the kinds of sums which would enable them to support local development without destroying the forest ecosystems. I think on the INDCs, if I can jump on that, not ambitious enough yet, not ambitious enough. And pushing it back over to Christiana, I think the focus will be on what is going to be the ratchet or review mechanism going forward from Paris, which will encourage countries to revise their commitments upwards.
Well, that's exactly correct. So yes, we have received 65 climate change plans. We will receive a few more before October or in fact even before the end of the year. But let me be abundantly clear. No matter how many more INDCs we receive, that will not make a material difference in the temperature trajectory that is currently already established by those INDCs. The good news here is that we already know that those INDCs have actually brought the trajectory from where we were a few years ago, which was tending toward 4 to 5 degrees, we're now down into the 3 degrees range. So certainly improvement, absolutely necessary for countries to dig into their development plans and figure out how can they contribute to this. Very, very necessary, not sufficient. In Paris, we will not have, as a sum total of all INDCs, in fact, of a sum total of all these climate change plans from governments, as well as non-state actors who will also come forward with their efforts, we will not have enough emission reductions, planned emission reductions, to bring this down to a 2-degree trajectory by 2030. We will not. So I don't want anyone to go to Paris expecting that we're going to do that. That is the reason why countries have in full understanding that this is not something that can be changed dramatically overnight. Countries are devising under the Paris Agreement a progressive process through which they will come together every 5 or 10 years, many hope it's going to be 5 years, to review what progress they're making along this trajectory that needs to improve over time. So think about it as though you were getting on a train to go to destination X, and you don't get to destination X immediately as you board the train. You go through different milestones. So countries will be going through different milestones. They will check to see where they are, and at every point in time, hopefully every 5 years, because technology is going to improve, because capital shifts are going to accelerate, they will be able to increase their efforts, and they must get on to a 2-degree trajectory. That destination is not yet agreed in Paris and will be one of the marks of success.
Thank you very much. the Inga indigenous group has recovered rights to their 22,000 plus hectares of ancestral territory and expelled the armed guerrillas, paramilitaries, and drug traffickers that between 1986 and 2004 violated their territorial rights. I'm unfamiliar with how they expelled them. I'm not as up on all the details of these prize winners and the politics of those situations. I'm not assuming that Norway paid for that too, correct? But I'm just I don't know. But where in these countries, regardless of whether the only thing I have to say about that is that regardless of whether the conflict is with drug traffickers, as it seems to be the case here, and other armed guerrillas, where these people are fighting to save indigenous regions in war-torn countries, that's a very, very difficult thing to deal with that we're not familiar with here in the United States. Here in the United States, we try to save places, and there is no war per se. There's capitalism is the problem. It's profit-making is the problem. The Canadian tar sands is an enormous issue here. I mean, and I don't want to go off on a tangent there, but there's no guns and drug dealers up there in Calgary that I know of that are responsible for this, but the fight that's being fought to educate people about that, the fight that's fought to educate people about how the myth of nuclear power as clean technology, when the mining of uranium to make fuel rods is one of the most contaminating processes known to man. Those fuel rods don't grow on the uranium fuel rod tree. They have to be manufactured somehow, and that's a very contaminating process. And when you try to educate people in the United States about those realities, about where our energy comes from, what the truth of that is, it's very, very difficult. But we don't have that problem. This is a worse problem. You know, where in order to achieve your goal, you're going to get a gun shoved in your face. And for that, I think the only thing I can say is my most heartfelt congratulations to the Inga people for their success on that. And in that sense, they deserve this prize as much, if not more, than anyone on the list. So there you have it. Okay. Looking through the list, I was particularly inspired by the Munduruku Ipareg Ayu movement in Brazil. This indigenous group of 13,000 people in the Brazilian Amazon launched a movement called Ipareg Ayu, which in local language means I am strong, I know how to protect myself.
They started the movement to resist a proposed dam development project that would submerge their ancestral territories, 1 million hectares of primary rainforest, and they succeeded. Together, the community has secured stronger land rights, protected forests and wildlife, and stopped illegal logging and mining in their territories. It is a movement for positive environmental and social change that is led by the people themselves.
I'd like to tell you why this group's decision to put their lives on the line should matter to all of us. I'm here today as an activist who is genuinely concerned about climate change and how it affects the world's poorest and most vulnerable people. For many years now, I have been vocal about the threat of climate change and the need for international action. What I have come to realize over that time is that the change we need is not going to come from governments alone.
Governments are critical, yes, and so are the companies that must stop buying products that are grown in land that has been illegally cleared of forests. But leadership is needed at all levels, and there is power and creativity and ingenuity and vision coming from grassroots movements everywhere. So this is why we are so honored to be associated with the Equator Prize and to be recognizing the role of indigenous peoples and local communities like the Munduruku that are often risking their lives to protect our planet and to defend their rights and to fight for sustainable livelihoods.